Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday evening. We're always grateful for you joining us and making us a part of your Sunday night. We have a panel of experts assembled here ready to talk tonight about a subject matter that we believe matters to all of you. Get into that in just a bit. First, though, a couple of reminders. You'll see information at the bottom of the screen all throughout the show. That's how you can interact with us. The show is always better whenever you do that. Also, a cool thing that the firm of Hollis Wright makes available each and every show. So each and every Sunday night, attorneys standing by live to speak with you. So if you pick up the phone and give them a call, the opportunity tonight to speak with an attorney off air, confidential conversation, but a great opportunity for you to get some feedback tonight. If you have some legal questions or need some advice tonight, opportunity for you to do that there tonight, so take advantage of that. Leading our conversation, he is the managing partner of the firm Hollis Wright, Josh Wright. Good to see you, sir.
You too. I hope you had a great week.
I did indeed. Thank you.
We're going to be talking about some interesting stuff tonight related to probate and the probate court and ways through wills and trusts and through some of the other processes you can use in probate, you can save the length and expense associated with the probate process. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight.
Good deal. Look forward to that. And a guest, one of our favorite guests, we keep asking him back. He must have some good answers.
Well, it should say something. If we keep asking Chris Reid back,
that's right.
It's a good thing that he's doing a good job. But we've had him on several different topics. You've got kind of a, if you will, a multifaceted practice that does a lot of stuff, but you also dabble over in the probate world.
Yes, and I enjoy it a lot. And a lot of what we do, even on the other side, probate affects everything. So I'm excited to talk about this tonight.
So let's talk a little bit about this area of the law. I mean, primarily we're going to be talking about wills and ways that people can save the timing of the probate process and the expense associated with the probate process while they're still alive. Is that fair?
Yeah, wills are very simple. It takes a little bit of time. We usually can get them done in about an hour at our law firm, but it saves an incredible amount of money. The average time it takes to probate a will is about 6 months. Now, if you die without one, it can take up to 2 years. Some recent people that were famous that died without a will, Prince, for example, who had like $50-something million, I believe, didn't spend $500 to just write out a simple will, and it creates so much issues. And it's not just the attorney's fees and the expense, it's the family drama, because you just lost a loved one. That's hard enough. But then money creates so many issues, and it's not that there's bad people, it's just no one was sure how the person that just passed away wanted to spend the money. And so it's so easy to do. Everyone needs a will. It's the only legal instrument you are 100% going to use because we all die. So I just cannot stress enough that people should get them, and they're so inexpensive.
Yeah, so let's talk just for a second, because I think that's kind of an important concept. And I get this question a lot in my practice, I'm sure you do too. When we deal with, for example, wrongful death related personal injury cases, what happens if somebody dies without a will in Alabama? How does that process work?
Well, technically everyone has a will because the state of Alabama has designated a will for people that don't write it out. And without getting too much in the weeds, basically, if you die and it's just your spouse, they get everything. If you get parents, they'll get some of it, and then your spouse will get most. If you have kids, your spouse gets half, and your kids will get a certain amount. And there's there's basically a will the state will write out, but most of the time it's not consistent with what people would actually want. And so that's the problem. The state just is making assumptions because you didn't take the time to go ahead and put your wishes down. And it creates a lot of frustration because a lot of times people would not have wanted it to be that way. And so technically everyone that is alive in any state has a default will, but often it's not consistent with their wishes.
So we call this concept intestate distribution to the extent that someone passes away without a written will, like Chris was saying. The state has defined through statute, kind of through a codification, exactly where the money goes and how it's to be distributed. There's really no discretion for the court. There's no discretion for the lawyers involved in those cases, and the money is distributed consistent with what we call intestate distribution. So it really takes it out of the hands of the family and puts it in what the state has created.
You know, one of the things I believe people hear whenever they hear the examples of a Prince or a star or some millionaire, billionaire who did not have a will, you know, they look at themselves with maybe just a homeowner and not a whole lot, not nearly as much as someone with a whole lot. And I think they say, well, if I was Prince, I would get a will. But all I've got is just my house and a couple of other possessions. So what do you say to those folks who say, I don't have a whole lot to pass along anyway?
Well, even if you don't have much, it's still I think it's about a third the cost as far as attorney's fees, and it's a fourth of the time, and it prevents the drama. And when you're talking about a will, an attorney can do a will for $300, $500, and you'll never have to mess with it again. So it's a very inexpensive cost. Even if all you had was $10,000 or $15,000, you're still going to save time and money just getting it done. But also, even if it's just sentimental items, like you've got 2 kids, but something was really important to a son or a daughter, it's probably nice to have a document saying, I know how much this meant to you, and that's why I'm giving it to you. So it's more than just, hey, this is going to help out. And there's no taxes whenever you die, because now that passes without being taxed, which is excellent, so you don't have to worry about taxes. But more than that, I think it shows and demonstrates your final thoughts and wishes, and it does mean a lot to kids. Like my granddad died a year ago, and he put some things in the will that meant a lot to my family. And even though some of it was technical and some of it was this and that, like you can put things in wills that mean something to people, and I think doing that can help ease the pain of a death.
And let's talk just for a second a little bit about how expensive and lengthy the probate process itself can be. There are things that you can do in addition to wills that help kind of streamline that process at the time of death, isn't there?
There's a lot of different things you can do. I mean, sometimes it's just simply like having somebody else on your bank account. Like like that example, my granddad had my mom on his bank account, joint bank account. That made it so much easier because they could go around the process. You can do pay on death accounts. There's sometimes you can set up certain trusts. But there's things that go not through the estate process, like for example, life insurance. Everyone's like, what do I need to do in a will? What do I do about my life insurance? Well, that's a totally separate process, and that's just designating your beneficiary, so you don't have to worry about it. The biggest thing that we're seeing now, and I try to get people to start doing, is digital issues that put those in the wills. Like for example, if you have something that's a password or something to access certain accounts, or there's a specific location, we think about that digitally because we remember how hard it was for the FBI to open up an iPhone during the terrorist attack a few years ago. So now those are some new areas that attorneys are thinking about, even in wills. And so sometimes I'll say, look, if you're trying to figure out a password or something, you're trying to get access, that's incredibly important because that's going to slow everything down. And it's not like a judge's order can fix a technological problem. So.
Are we close to break?
We're good.
All right. So one of the things I want to talk about then now is the issue of the difference between a beneficiary distribution and a will-related distribution, because I've served as an administrator before and as a personal representative for an estate, and I can just tell you it streamlines the process when you have beneficiary-based distributions versus a distribution through a will. It still can streamline the process. Let me give you a good example. To the extent, for example, that someone has life insurance, that life insurance designates a beneficiary. That money does not run through the will. It is not probated. It goes directly to the heir upon death because it is a beneficiary distribution. Another example, which Chris alluded to earlier, is this concept that if you, for example, have a home owned by multiple people, kind of like an account owned by multiple people, but a home that has a joint right of survivorship, that home probably is not going to be probated with a will, and at the time of death, it instead is going to go directly to the beneficiary, if you will, or the joint tenant that has right to that home. So there are some things that you can do to make sure that at the time of death, things are streamlined to make sure that those assets and resources are allocated to the right people. And I think I've described it correctly.
No, you were 100% perfect.
Yeah. It's an interesting topic. When we get back, we're going to be talking about a lot of different issues. Probably one of the most important issues, David, is this issue of how do you properly do a will? We get that question all the time. And, have I done what I need to do to have a proper will? We'll talk about that when we come back.
Good deal. We'll step aside right there. Our first break of the evening, opportunity to remind you of how you can get in touch with us. That information on your screen. Also, you'll find the firm of Hollis Wright on Facebook. Just search Hollis Wright. Find them there on Facebook and on Twitter, Hollis_Wright. Also on Instagram as well. So Hollis Wright all over social media. Take advantage of those opportunities to see what's going on at the firm and to a great educational experience and an educational informational use there of social media. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, talking about probate and estates tonight. Appreciate you being with us. Also, a reminder here as we welcome you back into The Attorneys that attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by to speak with you live. That confidential, off-air conversation will take place if you just pick up the phone and give them a call. Josh?
Chris, one of the things we talked about before we went to break is this concept of what does it take to actually create a proper will? And I think people feel like this concept of a will is more formal than it is, but there are certain elements that have to be met in order for it to be an effective will. Is that fair?
That's fair. Actually, surprisingly, Alabama has pretty formal requirements, and there's some things that you should do even though they're not technically required. You have to have 2 adult witnesses that are over the age of 18, although I think you have to be 19 for other scenarios, so you need 2 adults to witness it. You generally want to have it notarized, so it's self-proving, which means after someone dies, you don't have to call the witnesses, come to probate court because they could have moved or something could have happened. So you have to get a notary, 2 adult witnesses. You have to sign it correctly. I have all my clients sign the bottom right-hand corner of the page and make sure that their signatures are done perfectly accurate. Even stuff with the notary, they have to check the driver's licenses before they do stuff. So there's just several different things you have to do. And if things are not done correctly and there's a dispute, it can cost millions of dollars. Like we're litigating cases that are in the $1 to $5 million range because wills are written poorly, vaguely, or they just didn't think through things. And so that's why I say just have an attorney help you with it. Going to these online sites, like if you miss 1 or 2 things, a judge could say this isn't legally enforceable, and then everything that you wanted to happen didn't happen because you didn't want to spend pretty much the same amount of money just going to an attorney. So you can do it right, but there really are a lot of things you have to do correctly, and in missing them can totally negate the legality of the document.
Yeah, and you raise an important issue, which is it could negate the legality of the document. How does that process happen? Is it that there is an heir that's left out of the will oftentimes that wants to challenge it? How does that normally happen?
It normally happens in a situation where there's a lot of money at stake, obviously. Normally, even if there's some minor errors, nobody challenges it and everybody's okay with it, the court they usually are okay with some of that, depending on the judge. But whenever someone's left out, or there's been like recent will changes, or somebody's mental health was questioned whenever they were doing the will, we see a lot of those cases. But sometimes it's just sloppy drafting. Like somebody used a form draft, or an attorney used a form draft, and it didn't apply to that situation. And now it's just going to get disputed because when you're talking about millions and millions of dollars, people have much more incentive to challenge it. And you can win on some technical issues, in which cases a person's wishes aren't actually done, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars going to a party they really did not want that money to go to.
We're talking a lot about probate handling wills and estates. What else does probate handle? What other things might make their way before a judge?
They do involuntary commitments, people that have mental illness, and when I started out, I did a lot of those, but they also do adoptions, and that's something I really enjoy doing. We see a good amount of those in January, we see a good in the summer, but those are exciting. You get to see families come together. It's usually a positive thing. Everyone in the court is excited for that family. It used to be that there was a stigma, a negative stigma associated with adoption, and even the code as written still preserves privacy and all these different elements for it. But now it's much more common for that to be a public event, for people to be excited about it. And so we see a lot of out-of-state adoption, in-state adoptions, international adoptions, and it's just it's a fun process to be a part of, and we see so much difficult things, dealing with people that have serious injuries or lost family members, getting to see families come together and start new families. It's exciting. The only thing I wish we would reform is make the system a little less expensive and take some of the regulations off so people that maybe don't have the access to the money for the attorney's fees could still adopt kids as long as they're good and loving families.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that and unwrap it. I mean, someone comes to your office and says, look, we have decided that we want to adopt for whatever reason that may be. What's the starting process? How does that work?
There's a checklist that they give most people, depending on what type of adoption. It's several things, but basically a state agency has to make sure the home's safe. They have to do interviews, and if somebody else is giving up the rights to a child, you have to have the natural parent generally give up rights or set up a different arrangement where they can still see the child. But basically, you have to follow that very specifically. They're very strict about criminal background checks, making sure not only that the home is safe, but you can provide for the child. There's things regarding health and safety and welfare that they're going to do. But it's a very thorough process. A lot of it's filling out a lot of paperwork. But the thing that takes time is getting the state agencies to do the inspections, and just some of the checks take a good amount of time. But it is really expensive because there's so many legal things you have to take care of. And so it can cost, even for ones that are simple, $10,000, $15,000, and ones that are complicated, you're talking $50,000 just depending on the situation.
Do you have both private adoption where you're not involving a state agency and then a state agent, or a more regulated adoption, or how does that process work?
Well, there's certain things that everyone has to do. That even regardless of however you adopt a child, they're still going to need some home inspection, and you're still going to have to do the background checks and everything else. Now, there's certain agencies that will cater to people of certain faiths or backgrounds, and there's the same process, but the way you would get the child is a little bit different. But basically, everyone would go through the same method. It just is, some people may want to adopt from like a Catholic agency or a Protestant one, or one that has no religious affiliation, and that's kind of how it's always worked in the United States.
About 2 minutes remaining before we have to take a break, but a question here about how confidential are adoptions? How trustworthy that if they don't want that to get out, that doesn't get out?
They actually do a really good job on this, and like I said, the stigma's not there like it used to be, because a lot of times this is a very exciting thing. But in cases, I've done ones where it was very sensitive and we wanted privacy for whatever reasons.
Right.
The court does an amazing job. They keep things sealed. This is one of the things the government takes very seriously. And so those records, I've never heard of a scenario where things got out that didn't need to get out, at least with any of our clients. So I think the court in this instance does an amazing job making sure that privacy is taken care of and nobody has to worry about uncomfortable information, because you don't want to bring that to a child's attention. There's just no reason for it.
When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about adoption, but I also want to talk about amendments. If somebody wants to amend a will, for example, let's talk through that, because that's kind of an important process, and there's the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it.
Right. All right, we're stepping aside right there. This is our final break, so if you've got a call or a question, ways that you can get in touch with us, the way you can contact the show, you see it right there. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Tyler Vail with the law firm of Hollis Wright. As with any industry, it's important in the legal world to hire an attorney that is knowledgeable and has a track record of success. But with so many attorneys out there and so many different types of cases, how does someone decide the right lawyer to hire? In this week's Legal 411, we're answering the question, what should I consider in hiring an attorney? In-state versus out-of-state, big firm or little firm, recommendations from friends or family, the internet, the phone book, or TV. With so many choices and so much information, it can be an overwhelming task trying to make the right decision. To complicate things, choosing a lawyer is an important and sometimes life-affecting decision and should not be taken lightly. So how do you select an attorney? Do your research. Look the firm up on the internet. Ask friends and family whether they know or have any experience with a specific firm. If you know any local lawyers, ask them about the reputation of the firms you may be considering. Call a local law office and ask if they are handling cases like yours. there's a good chance they can help you. But if they can't, they can always refer you to someone they respect who handles your type of case. And remember, ask questions face to face. Ask about their experience in handling cases like yours. How often someone from their office will be available to you, and what you can expect during the process. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
Welcome back into the Attorney's Hour final segment here. So the final opportunity, just a few minutes remaining for you to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with an attorney standing by live. Attorney from Hollis Wright standing by, ready to talk with you for the next few minutes of the show. So take advantage of that opportunity. Josh?
So I get this question a lot, which is I want to make an amendment to my will. I want to adjust something, an asset, where it's going, where we're going to put cash, those types of things. How do you go through that process, and do you have to be careful to follow the formalities to make sure that your adjustment to your will, your amendment to your will is actually effective?
You need to be very careful, but for the most part, because it's so easy to just print out a new will or use the old one, every time someone's coming to that, we just simply make a new will if you have it saved, because doing codicils and all that stuff, it doesn't make much sense, especially because if you do it wrong, there's issues with it. So what I say, take your old will and you have to physically destroy it. Because when you have competing wills and let's just say the dates weren't like listed or there's some issue, then you're going to have a contest. So the most important thing, if you need to make an amendment or change, it's very inexpensive to do it. Just have an attorney draft you a new will and that'll take care of it, but be sure that you destroy your old will after the new one is active. Now I don't tell people destroy it and then come to our office and do it. Let's wait until the new one is active. We'll destroy it in the office and we'll make sure there's never going to be a will conflict.
Talk just for a second, I know this is a little off topic, but an issue that I think about. Sometimes parents will try and define where their children go if they should pass away. It may not, I don't know if that's formally in a will or what kind of document that would be. Are those intents, are they considered at the time of death? If, for example, two parents pass away and they wanted a sister to get the children or a grandmother to get the children, is that something that you can contract for?
I think it's good to put it in the will, and a lot of times the courts respect that. Of course, they're still going to make sure that's an adequate home and the person's able to take care and that they want the children. But we usually put that in every single will, like, look, if something happens to me, I want these godparents or this family member to take care of my children. And courts generally respect the wishes of family unless there's an extremely good reason not to do it. So for the most part, if you put it in the will and you pass away, and let's say your sister and husband, you want them to take care of the children, there's not going to be any issues as long as it's a safe, stable home, because ultimately the court respects the family and they're not going to interfere with that institution without a very good reason.
A lot of this just ultimately comes down to interpreting intent. What was someone's intent? Did they intend this? Is the document clear on its face? And that's another reason why you want to get counsel involved to be able to make sure that the intent is clarified.
This is one of those subjects where online or conventional wisdom, there are tons of opinions. You know, even some say that, you know, if you just write it out and sign it, then it's legal. What do you say to folks who you know, don't want to fool with an attorney and just want to handle it themselves?
Well, I mean, do it at your own peril. The likelihood if you try to do something like that, you're not going to meet the formalities. And there's a reason that we have these formalities, because if we allowed people to just do that, imagine the situations where people could write stuff that was like wasn't their signature or something changed, there's no date on it. So there's a reason we have to do the formalities. It protects their intentions and there's no question about where things need to go. So I would say if you really aren't willing to spend $200-300 to make sure everything's taken care of after your death, that's an issue. So I would encourage you to do it, because not doing it is going to put your kids and your estate, and it could put you in peril. So just get it done.
We get this question a lot about related to this show. What's the difference between a will and a trust? And can a trust also be an effective document and component to your estate?
Yes, you can use trust. A lot of times people think they need trust, and really they just need a simple will. There's a lot of reasons people use it. Mainly, sometimes it's because they have minor kids and they want somebody else to make decisions about education, a lot of different things. Sometimes it's to avoid tax penalties while people are still alive. Trusts are in effect during someone's life generally, and then wills are after it. But I think with the new tax reform law that passed, I think there's going to be less incentives for certain types of trusts that are simply for tax avoidance purposes now that we've pretty much gotten rid of the estate tax and done a lot of different things. So I would say that the will, you can even put instructions to form a trust in a will. We do that for some of our clients and say, look, we can just have a good executor, set up some instructions, and this may never happen because you probably aren't going to die in the next few years while your kids are minor children, and then you don't have to spend an extra $2,000 or $3,000 doing all this stuff. Now that's probably being a bad businessman, but it honestly, there's no reason people have to do it unless there's financial reasons for it.
Right.
What about a living will? How is that different?
I do those for everyone. We don't charge for that. It's just those are the instructions. Let's say you got injured and you just don't want to be on life support forever when you're brain dead. That just gives clear instructions to the hospital because fortunes have been completely decimated. My dad's a physician, and he's seen so many heartbreaking stories of that. And so I'd say we do those for free, and everyone should do that. And it takes 5 minutes.
Just a couple of minutes remaining, but opportunity for both of you to leave a final thought. And Chris, if you would, you go first, please.
I would just encourage everyone just to get a will. It's real simple. You'll feel a lot better, especially after you got married or you had kids. It's very inexpensive. It won't take much time. And if you are looking to adopt, there are so many kids right now who need good homes. And we can work with people even if they don't have the means for it. We've often cut our rates and did stuff just if they're good families because the kids really need homes. And if you're interested in that process, it's really exciting. I've never had somebody do an adoption that regretted it.
Yeah, the one thing I'd say is that if you want to direct where your assets, your resources are going to go long term, and you want to have some say, don't wait. Get it done now because you never know what can happen. You never know when your day is going to be. And there are a lot of tools that you can use to be able to cut down the very complicated probate process after someone's death by being smart on the front end, by creating a will or creating certain beneficiary distributions, those types of things. And using a guy like Chris is the way to do that. And it's not complicated, as he mentioned, and you really can make it a lot easier on your family once you pass away if you've dotted the I's and crossed the T's before you get to that stage in life.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, appreciate the
Good
time.
job, as usual.
Nice job. Appreciate you being with us and you being with us as well each and every week. Thank you so much for that. As we wrap things up here, a reminder, Hollis Wright, they answer every call, text, and email. So even if you get in touch with them after the show is over, they will get back in touch with you. We appreciate you being with us each and every week. We'll see you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.